2 European events have now been completed. And now, I think it's time for us to move on to event number 3, which will be German League B. And I have decided that the car I will use for this, after giving it enough thought and consideration, we're heading over to the manufacturer dealerships again, and this time we are going to use the Audi S4, because I figure this is the car we need in order to get through this, and also because I'm convinced in saying the next event will not be too hard for us to get through. So that's what we're going to do next. And as for the colour, yeah, fuck it, I'll get this thing in red. Why not? As we have got a V8 motor under the hood of this thing. I'm also convinced in saying the tuning we need for this is not much, if any at all. You know what? I'll risk it. I think it's worth the risk to see what happens, as we have got a 5-race single race championship for German League B. These are the cars that we'll accept, including the Roof RGT. It's basically sports cars and supercars that are eligible for this. And appropriately, we start off at the Nürburgring. Then we've got Tokyo, Fuji, High Speed Ring, and Suzuka Circuit to end off the European events. 3 very appropriate locations, I might add. But anyway, let's go to Nürburgring for race 1. Yeah, I'm convinced in saying this is not going to be too hard to pull off. So we've got 3 Mercedes, 1 VW Golf GTI, which is available for the AI to use for some reason, and at the bottom we have the BMW M3 CSL. So we're probably going to be in for what I think is another relatively easy event. I also chose this thing in red because, well, why not? Okay, let's go. Before I waste any more of your time. 179 points if we win. I'm going to assume that's because the BMW is in the field. But I'm convinced in saying we should be fine with this, from what I can see. I'm convinced in saying I can win this. Except for saying this time, hopefully, I will not be crashed right before the end of this, as I was before, while trying to basically block 2 charging bulls that were just inevitably going to hit me, regardless of whether I blocked him or not. They would have probably still wrecked me anyway. And I think for that reason alone, this is where I'm going to have to get aggressive if I want to beat the ring. So I'm really going to have to make sure I start pulling off my maneuvers sooner rather than later. because if I don't, then well, the big fucking doo-doo will happen like it did before. Which means I have to force my way to the front. And that's already what I've done. I've forced my way to the front early. So hopefully whatever problems I had in the previous race will manage to be resolved once I really start to put the full lap together. Even though I am going to be down on speed, which is probably what's going to fuck with me towards the end of the lap. But I am convinced in saying I can win this, because I came very close to pulling this off before, and I'm convinced in saying I can do the same again. There is a reason why they call this place the Green Hell, as I said before, and it's not just because of all the trees. It's also because you have to be fast to show you can be fearless. As I now have a 3.7 second gap over the BMW, doing whatever it takes to make sure I do not get wrecked on that backstretch like I did before. I basically went for a last minute dive to see if I could get it to work, because I was basically cheated out of a win. And I know that because I was bumped from behind. But I figured this was where we would more or less enter what is probably the toughest stage of the game so far, since I've not really had a lot of success with winning recently. Well, winning on a consistent basis, that is. So 4.4 seconds is the gap. And at this point, it looks like we're very much on course to pulling this off. As long as I'm able to stay far enough ahead of both the BMW and Merc that beat me last time. I don't think they should be able to make up 4 seconds. Oh, they're closing in now. Well, the gap was nice while it lasted. But I think it's obvious to say that I have a serious deficit when it comes to top speed. And I think if there's any car that proves that better than anyone, it's probably that fucking BMW that's right behind me. Maybe I should have put on upgrades before doing this. But again, I tend to be the risk taker, in the hopes of saying that I will get somewhere. One other thing that's interesting to know is that I've already driven 20 miles in this thing. But either way, I still have to be fast. And I have to make it so I will not brake, like I did before. Or not crash and burn in my case, which is probably what happened before. And why everything just came crashing down the way it did. He is still right behind me. And no Mercedes is behind us this time, so I think it's very much a 2-horse race this time, compared to the fucking 3-horse race we had before. I think it's fair to say this is where things are about to go crazy. But I almost beat the BMW last time. I think if I wasn't muscled out the way by that Mercedes, there's a very real possibility that says I could have won this race first try. I also could have used the Audi Nuvolari if I really wanted to, but I figured it wasn't time yet, so that's why I was hesitant on using the Nuvolari Quattro. It probably would have made this a little too easy. Well, we got a third opponent closing in, but hopefully this time at least I shouldn't be in as much trouble as I was before when we got to the backstretch. It's a 1.2 mile straightaway, so really have to make sure I do not fall for the same intimidation I did before. And it looks like this time that's probably not going to happen. Here comes the BMW. He gives me a push. I did try and block him. Goes by me on the inside, but I am in the draft. He's got to be doing at least 160 by this point, maybe 170. I am down by 0.3, but I can catch back up. I really had to cut to the grass there if I was going to get the pass done there. It was a bit risky, I'll admit, but this time around at least, I did not get crashed by that fucking Mercedes this time. So, in a chaotic fight to the finish, I wind up winning by 1.1 seconds over the BMW. And the SL65 AMG that won last time finished P3 this time. Ironically, the same one that wrecked me before. Anyways, 10 grand for winning on my second attempt. And now, let's go to Tokyo. And this time, we have no BMW M3 in the field, but we do still have the SL65 AMG that put me in the wall last time at the Nürburgring. And aside from that, we got the Golf GTI and 3 other Mercedes, the SL600, the CLK55 and the E55. Okay, let's go. Oh boy, it just got even harder. I am convinced in saying that the only reason the AI really seem to be killing me on the straight, quite literally, is because they have more power than me. And I'm convinced in saying it's because they have just outright acceleration that just seems to keep blitzing me quite literally. And because I've already had 2 losses up to this point that were based on speed alone, I definitely need more power if I'm gonna be even close to catching the AI at this rate. So, I think it's time to put on the port polish. I might also put on the engine balancing as well, just in case. Because, well, I cannot afford to keep getting killed by the AI with their just clearly supreme straight line speed. That's what seems to be killing me at this time. And you know what? I think a little weight reduction might help as well, because this thing is pretty heavy. That might also bolster my chances of winning. Okay. How much is it for the... do I really need this? I probably don't. I think we have everything we need now. Should I put on the racing brakes? You know what? I'll put those on. Why not? It's clear that I need some tuning on this thing if I'm going to be successful. I cannot afford to keep this thing stock anymore if I'm going to win the rest of these. So let's try again with Tokyo. And as I would have expected, the SL600 is back in the field. But this time, we've got two other Audis, the RS4 and the RS6, along with the E55. So hopefully this should be easier. I think I just made this a lot easier, from what I can see. Maybe I didn't need the Stage 1 engine tuning on this thing. But either way, I think it's fair to say that this time I am most likely to not get killed on the straight as much as I have been doing up to this point. It might have also been because of the weight of the car as well, but that probably needed to come down as well. Still, that's a significant drop from the points I would have scored before, which were 195. However, it would honestly be an asinine decision for me to basically re-enter this race without some sort of performance gain. Because I know how fast that SL600 is down the straight. But I'm convinced in saying with my increased engine power, I should now have enough to realistically motor on by him. Because, well, last time I was in complete desperation to try and pass him. And this time, I'd like to be keeping up with him. So I think it's fair to say my upgrades are definitely helping me acceleration-wise now. I'm not being killed on the straight like I was before. In other words, being killed and then put dead on the water, as I was before. I'm convinced in saying it might have just been that little bit of engine tuning I was probably needing without the Stage 1 engine kit. It was probably just the port polish and the engine balancing I was really looking for. Oh well. At least it's giving me more of a shot now, compared to before. I very much seem to be matching the power of the SL600 now. So 4/10 is the gap. This was honestly an extreme must for me to put on the power upgrades I put on this thing. It basically had to be done if I was going to pull this off. And it looks like at this point I am going to pull this off. Because it doesn't look like the two mercs behind me are going to be challenging me this time. Or blitzing me down the straight like they were before. I have pulled this off. By less than a second probably, but I did get it pulled off. Okay, 1.4 seconds. Again, with the tuning, it had to be done. I was basically just getting killed with the amount of top speed deficit I was just having. It was basically killing me. And something had to be done in order for me to actually quash those top speed deficits I had. Also, everyone finished. So a double podium for the Mercedes, and the two Audis finished both above and behind the Golf GTI. This is probably going to be my biggest test of all. Fuji Speedway, because it's the fastest. I think it's probably faster than High Speed Ring if I'm not mistaken. Anyway, for this race we've got 2 BMWs and 3 Mercedes, including both the BMW M3 and the M3 CSL, which means this race is going to be very interesting. And if we can pull it off, we'll get 61 points, which is significantly less than the points we were getting before, at least in race 1, when I somehow managed to beat both the M3 CSL and the SL600 at the Nürburgring with what was essentially a stock Audi S4. But since I discovered I was not going to get so lucky in Tokyo, the upgrades I fitted to this thing, they basically needed to happen, or else I was literally going to get nowhere with this. Fortunately for me, however, the advantage here at Fuji is more to the player than it is to the AI. And I reckon that's gonna be the case again, judging by what I've seen so far. Even though I'm convinced in saying the reason why I was so slow before was because of the weight. But I think this time around, we've probably got this one where it stands. Sorry about that, my throat was basically drying up and I had to clear it. Also surprises me to say that I've not seen another Audi S4 in this event yet. And now the CSL M3 takes over second here at Fuji. And it looks as though at this point I am now pulling away. And now my gap is gone. As I almost spun off there. But either way, I have rejoined the track, and it looks as though this is going to be another more or less simple win for me at this stage. So 4.8 seconds is the gap now to the BMW. So I probably just needed the port polishing and the engine balancing, and then I probably would have been fine. Yeah. I'm convinced in saying the engine tuning I have on this thing now, it might have given me a little bit of an over advantage. But then again, Fuji normally is a track that does benefit the player more than it does the AI. I don't think I've actually been beaten here at Fuji before in this game yet. And it doesn't look like that's going to start now. Because I am 7 seconds clear of the M3 CSL. And I've overshot the exit of the chicane. Of course I have. But either way, it's okay, because I still have a 5.6 second lead over the BMW. And on the front straightaway, and there we go. I win Fuji first try, even though there were plenty of shots where I tried my hardest not to. But with my superior motoring now helping me, it's fair to say we did pretty well in race 3. Now we just have 2 races to go. Let's now head to High Speed Ring. So we have 2 races to go, as the Golf GTI that I used in the previous episode seems to very much be reappearing a lot at this point. I think I'll take the engine tuning off this time because I probably won't need it, since I do have the intercooler, port polish and engine balancing all fitted, and that's also added on, of course, to the weight reduction I put on earlier. So I'm convinced in saying we should be fine with this. I am, of course, keeping the racing brakes on because, well, I figured they might be needed. But here we go. And now the points increase to 96. You know what? I think we should be okay with that. Because I've driven enough laps around High Speed Ring to more or less know my way around the joint. Plus, I'm pretty sure that with me and my engine balancing with the port polishing, that was probably all I really needed to gain an advantage. Although I did put on weight reduction as well, just because, well, I figured there needed to at least be one weight reduction kit in order to stop the all-conquering BMW M3 CSL. Even though he wasn't exactly the person who blitzed me in Tokyo, it was mainly down to the SL600. I thought about using a Mercedes, but I think the reason why I opted out at the last minute is because, well, they were expensive. And while this was significantly cheaper than any Mercedes I could have bought. So, yeah. So it looks like I've now cleared the BMW M3. It probably was just the permanent engine tuning I was needing to fit to this thing, and that was probably all it was needing to be. And it looks like this is where the battle ends. So 2.5 seconds is the gap as we now head over the bridge, and now through this right-hander we go. And it pretty much looks as though we've got this one by the horns. I don't see us losing this race anymore, because I'm convinced in saying we have everything we need now. So 4.4 seconds is now the gap, and it looks as though at this point, like it's very much going to be advantage player. At least with the parts I seem to be running under the hood. So 4.4 seconds is now the gap, and it looks as though we are very much coming down to more or less pulling away from the BMW that's behind us. I think the other reason for that as well, because the SL600 wasn't in this race. It would have been more challenging if the SL600 was in this race, but I'm convinced in saying he wasn't. Also the first time in this series that we had no Mercs in a race. And I gotta say, I was pretty dominant in the end. And once again, the RS6 finishes at the back. So that's another 10 grand to me, and it looks as though this is where I will save the replay, because I can. Yeah, hard to believe it's almost 60 episodes at this point. But still, I have made some good progress up to this point. Even though I won't get as much time to get through the rest of these, because, well, I'll be back at uni again next week. Anyway, one race to go. Yeah, I'm convinced in saying these last 2 races have suddenly become a lot easier because, well, the mercs we had in the first 3 races, well, they're not really present here. And my only real challenger is probably the M3 CSL. Although the last time I did race here at Suzuka, in a single race event, I did have a pretty interesting fight with the, I think it was the Toyota Sprinter Trueno, if I'm not mistaken, or in other words, the Tofu car. Basically the mascot car for Initial D. But it's fair to say that the racing for these last 2, it's become a lot easier. And yes, I did take off my last 2 engine parts, but also kept the racing brakes on because I figured they were needed. Oh, we've got another S4 in this race as well, which is interesting. And if we win this event, we will get precisely 132 A-Spec points, which is still significantly less than the 195 points I would have got in Tokyo had I beaten the SL600. But on the straight, well, I had no chance of besting him. But since I have put on my fair share of upgrades on this thing to make it more competitive, it's fair to say I've given myself a lot more of a chance this time. I should also mention we're being led by an Audi RS6, which, believe it or not, is also is technically a sport wagon, judging by its shape and design. Anyway, up the inside as we get through the hairpin, and now into 200R, as it looks as though I now officially have the lead. And now the M3 clears the S4. I figured I had to use this car at some point because, well, I like it, and also because, well, it was one of the cheapest choices I could use. I could have been even more interesting and used the RS6 Advant, I think that is, or just the RS6, but I chose to use the S4 because, well, I already used a sport wagon once, and that was in the Pro Series, and I might consider using it again if I really feel that way inclined. But at this time, well, sometimes it's important to be more things than just, well, fastidious. I think that's the word I'm looking for. Anyway, I have a 1.2 second lead over the BMW M3 CSL. And it looks as though for these last 3 races, like, I'm pretty much on my way to sweeping these. But I figured since I had some easier races to get through last time at both Fuji and High Speed Ring, I might as well remove most of the, well, pretty much all of the removable tuning except for my racing brakes, because I figured they might help me get through the corners better. And they more or less seem to be doing their job, as I am driving a 4-wheel drive Audi S4, and it looks as though this is going to be another one of those close-fought thrillers here at Suzuka. Ironically, what I had in my 80s Toyota Celica here at the end of the Japanese 80s festival, where I did manage to beat the Sprinter Trueno GT Apex, or in other words the Toyota AE86 in a close-fought thriller. Looks as though this one is probably going to be under identical circumstances, I would guess. Again, the bump was not intentional, that was just me trying to see if I could pass him heading into Spoon Corner. He's got the inside for 130R. He's going to throw the block as much as he can, but he's not going to get there because I have the running room on the outside. I think I just passed him at 130R from the outside. You have no idea how hard it is to do that. But as we head through Casio Triangle, and it looks as though I will outduel the BMW M3 CSL after a close-fought fight towards the end of that second lap. My god, has the racing been close this time. There have definitely been some barn burners. Or, I guess if we're using historical terms, they've basically been barnstormers. If you were wanting me to make a historical reference, that is. But whatever. We sweep the last 3 races of German League B without any real issues. And then it was the Audi S4 that finished in 3rd, so double podium for the Audis, which is a good thing. Then it was the Audi RS4 who finished 4th, the CLK 55 finished in 5th, and at the back, and I think he appeared in every single race up to this point, it was the VW Golf Mark V GTI. I should also mention, all 3 cars that sweep to the podium were ironically made in 2003, and that also includes me as well. So 2003 basically sweeps the podium at Suzuka. Anyway, what do we get? We get the Mercedes 190e Evo 2 touring car. It's ironically the same car that we drove in that Nürburgring test. And that took me just under an hour to get through all 5 of those races. Trial and error included, of course, with the first 2. Basically, I won the first race without any upgrades, and then from this race onwards, I had to fit upgrades. But there we go. After dealing with a few close-fought thrillers of races, we have beaten German League B, and I think what we'll do next is the Euro Hot Hatch League. Actually, no. We'll do the French Championship next. My correction. We'll do this one next, and then we'll do the Hot Hatch League. But anyway, there we go. So, that's now 3 European events done and dusted. And next up will be the French Championship, or to France Championnat. I hope I said that right. Anyway, let's now look for our next car. Here it is. The Mercedes 190e Evo 2 touring car from 1992. And this thing sells for a staggering 371 grand. Not bad. Not bad. This is not going to be the last time we win a DTM touring car. I know that for sure. Ironically, another touring car that came from the Group A regulations era. So we're now 38.4% complete, and I think I'll call it a day, because I've been at this now for a few hours and because I have to be places. So, next time on Gran Turismo 4, to France Championnat.